Good afternoon, everyone. So I know all of you are here to talk about the two-letter acronym that's on everybody's mind, AI. But we're going to focus ourselves on generative AI, not the broader topic of AI, but focusing on generative AI. I'll have Anurag and Fletcher also join me on stage in a little bit. But before that, let's dive in and figure out what can generative AI do for us. So if you think about generative AI, just open up the aperture to what you've been accustomed to so far. So it is a piece of technology that actually allows for generation of content, for summarization of content, or for transformation of content. So any kind of content, whether it's text, whether it's visual, so images, as well as video, or whether it's audio. And if you think about text, it could be code as well, because code is a part of text. Increasingly, what we're also seeing is that all of these modes of content are merging into the model as well. So models are increasingly becoming multimodal. So when you think about use cases in your organization, don't just think single mode, think multimodal, because you will be blending text to speech, text to video, text to code, and so on and so forth. So think about it in terms of multimodality. Now, since so much can be done with generative AI, we found out from the AI Readiness Index that Cisco ran a couple of weeks ago that 97% of companies really are under pressure to build something that is GenAI first and deploy those solutions in their organization. But only 14% of organizations are actually ready for it. And there's a reason for this. The reason is that generative AI is actually evolving pretty rapidly. And so as it evolves, if you think about building solutions, it's hard to keep up. It's hard to keep up with the model evolution that's happening out there. It's hard to keep up with the safety needs of deploying these applications. It's hard to keep up with the scalability requirements, with the security requirements that align to the policies in your organization. So that's why it's very difficult for organizations to keep up with the pace of generative AI that's happening out there. And by the way, it's true for everybody. People who are in the weeds in generative AI, the people who've actually invented transformers and generative AI also are having a hard time keeping up. So you're not alone. So take comfort in that fact that you're not alone. But if you think about the journeys that you need to go through, we've tried and categorize it in 4 buckets here. And just assume that you will be in all of these 4 buckets every given moment in time. So the first bucket is you're just consuming that piece of technology. So if it's an app, ChatGPT, you might just be consuming it without customizing it. The second bucket is extending it. So let's say you take our foundation model, but you want to make it specific to your organization's needs. To do that, you'll have to bring in knowledge bases and data sources that are specific to your organization. Let's say you're dealing with finance, and you have a question about finance. You need to feed in data which is specific to finance in your organization for that model to be able to answer those questions. So that's extending what you're doing. Then moving, you might be customizing it. So to customize it, you might start with the actual model itself and fine-tune it to make sure that it suits your needs. Finally, if you are one of the daredevils that are AI first, you might actually build the foundation model yourself. So that's the last bucket. Typically, what you'll see is enterprises where we all belong. If you're not planning your birthday party, or if you're not planning your travel itinerary, you might be sitting in the second, the third, and the fourth buckets. Because just consuming an app as is probably not as relevant to organizations. You might need to customize it in some shape, way, or form. But again, like I said earlier, you will be in each one of these buckets all the time. You'll have tools that fall into each one of these buckets all the time. So as you think about all of those deployment modes, and if you think about how to develop apps or how to deploy some of these tools, what is it that you usually go through? First and foremost, you need to figure out use cases. What makes sense? what are the use cases that you need to pick to experiment. And if you're new to experimentation, the only piece of advice I would give is just jump in. Jump in, pick a use case that has a low cost of failure. So if something goes wrong, no big deal. Because if you don't jump in, the first thing that happens is you don't know what you don't know. And once you jump in, you realize it's not just the skill set gap that you might have. It might be the data gap that you might have. It might be that the pipeline that you're trying to build needs to come from various places, not just one vendor, but various different vendors. So all of these gaps, you will not figure out. It might be policies that your organization has put in place that disallow a few tools or don't let them work the way you would want them to work. So you do need to jump in. You need to pick a use case with a low cost of failure. And then you start thinking about what next. So let's figure out my KPIs. What do I want out of this deployment or this use case? And if I deploy them, what is that before and after metric that I'm measuring? I need to start thinking about safety. Is it going to hallucinate? Is it going to output toxic information? What kind of guardrails do I need to put in place so that it's safe as well as secure? And then you start experimenting. You start building a sandbox. You start looking at how these things behave, the application behaves in that sandbox. And once you're happy, you deploy at scale. And once you go in production, you need to worry about scaling, cost, security, and so on and so forth. So you usually go through all of these steps to actually make a generative AI use case real. What we are figuring out is people are jumping in, which is a good thing. They are on step 1. Steps 2, 3, and 4 are really, really difficult for people to grasp. And so here we're going to bring up a few people on stage in a little bit who've actually done this at scale at Cisco, and we can talk about challenges that they've faced while doing this at Cisco. But the other complication in deploying some of these GenAI workloads in your organization is that it's a multi-organizational problem. So you have the builder, the people who are actually building that use case. They want to run really, really fast. You have the spender. Usually it's the GM, or it could be the IT team. And in our case, we'll talk to both the IT team as well as the GM of the organization. And they want to know how we are doing. You might be spending a ton of money sending tokens to OpenAI. Are you getting the response that you needed? Are you getting a good before and after picture? Is there good return on investment? And then finally, there are approvers. You need to make sure that your data is safe, your information is safe, but also you need to make sure that your customer's information is safe. You need to make sure that there is no bias that is inherent in your models. You need to make sure that they're secure. You don't want somebody else to come in and hack your LLM pipeline, and things can go awry at that point. So all of these personas need to come together to make sure that your rollout is safe and secure, and it needs to be done pretty rapidly. So with that, what I'd like to do is invite Anurag, who's our SVP and CTO of Engineering in Collaboration for WebEx, as well as Fletcher, who's our CIO, to help and talk about how they have dealt with AI in the enterprise. Because in Cisco, we think about AI deployments in 2 categories. One is productivity, which is how is Cisco itself benefiting from the tools that are generative AI first and improving our productivity, as well as a builder like Anurag, who's using AI in his WebEx portfolio day in and day out to build some nifty features in the product. So Anurag and Fletcher, please come on board.
Thank you, Vijay.
Thank you for joining me, and let's have a conversation. Both of you have been deploying a bunch of these tools in Cisco, as well as building a product using generative AI in WebEx. So let me start with you, Anurag, and can you help us understand the kinds of features that you've built in collaboration using generative AI?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. So we've been using AI in WebEx for a long time. We have features like audio noise removal and virtual backgrounds and so on, but we're specifically talking about generative AI. So let me talk about that. Recently, we've added an AI-based assistant in WebEx, and that's going to be available across the whole portfolio. So all of the products in the WebEx suite, as well as our contact center, are going to benefit from this AI assistant. And to give you a few examples of what it can do, if you were at the keynote this morning, you saw Jeetu talk about a little bit of this. To jog your memory, one of the productivity boosters that the AI-based assistant enables is this capability to catch up very quickly. So you might have joined a meeting a little bit late, or you were in a meeting but you had to step away for a little bit. The assistant is always active, and so it can help you catch up on what you missed. And you can have a follow-up conversation with the assistant, so you can, for example, ask if anyone took your name, if anyone gave you an action item, and then at the end of the meeting, you get a nice summary and insights out of that. So that's a very simple, straightforward, obvious example, but a huge productivity boost. If you think about another capability where generative AI is very good, it's generating new content. And so this example that I'm sharing now is the ability to rewrite a message and make it better. And this is something that I do quite often with my team. Before I send a message, I want to make sure that I'm friendly, I'm inclusive, and I'm getting my point across, but really make sure that I can cultivate my relationship. So AI can help you do that as well. And if you think about the admin persona, people who are managing these deployments, the AI assistant can be quite a bit of time saver there as well. Jeetu talked about this example this morning as well. Let's say I want to troubleshoot a problem with a call or a meeting quality. I can just engage in a dialogue with the AI assistant in WebEx Control Hub, and it can bring all the relevant information at my fingertips. And you were earlier talking about generative AI in the context of audio and video and other things as well. So this is an example where I'm asking a text-based question, but the assistant comes back with charts, and it's truly multimodal in that sense. And so these are just a few examples, but like I said earlier, AI is going to be embedded across the whole portfolio in WebEx, and it's going to be pervasive in everything we do.
So there are a lot of companies out there that build AI-first solutions. Yeah. How is Cisco any different from any of them?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because almost everyone in the industry is talking about assistants now, right? Like that's the most obvious first step that everyone is taking. Our approach is slightly different because we think very deeply about how people communicate. And when you think about how we communicate with each other, there's a part of that communication that is text-based. Emails, chat messages, SMSs, and large language models are very good at summarizing those, extracting insights out of that. But a lot of communication happens in non-text modalities. People communicate a lot with gestures and reactions and tone of voice. And if you're not capturing that information, you're really missing out on a lot of context. So this is why we've introduced industry's very first real-time media models that can capture all of that context that is happening in audio and video. And then when you combine that with large language models, you can deliver some amazing capability. So that's what sets us apart. And then one other thing I'll say is, given our heritage in strong audio and video capabilities, we've recently announced a brand new audio codec. When you think about those assistant capabilities I was showing earlier, if the assistant cannot hear you properly, it won't generate a good transcript. And if it doesn't have a good transcript, then the summarization will be pretty poor. So fundamental problem is, how do you get crisp audio and video across the network, especially under heavy packet loss conditions? And so that's where we're applying generative AI to reconstruct packets on the wire and deal with any kind of network condition. And that's like another example of how we differentiate.
So can you also talk to us about a few challenges that you faced? Because this journey is non-trivial, as we just discussed.
Yeah, you touched upon some of those, but from a very practical point of view of what we have done, I'll start with data privacy as the first principle, because at Cisco, privacy is a core of everything that we do. And so when you're building these products, you have to make sure that your customers' data is protected. How do you make sure personally identifiable information or IP does not leak to especially any of these LLM vendors if you're integrating those products? Another thing that becomes very interesting with generative AI is safety. And imagine a text-based interface, a prompt-based interface. How do you make sure that the responses that come back are not in such a way that are going to drive some, some bad behavior or bad responses or hateful speech and things like that? So you have to make sure you have guardrails there. Another one is a classic AI problem that is very relevant with generative AI, which is bias. And this is where, at Cisco, we have a very well-established responsible AI program. You are the executive sponsor, so you know all about this. And this is also, you were talking about cross-org collaboration. This is a perfect example where we have a responsible AI program that guides how we build products. And then I will also add cost as a vector here. When I'm building products, I want to make sure that the cost isn't prohibitive, that I don't really jack up my prices to such a level that nobody can benefit from these productivity gains. So how do you build and architect systems in such a way that it can be manageable from a cost point of view? So those are just a handful of challenges that we run into.
So let me come to you, Fletcher, and you have been rolling out GenAI tools within Cisco for more than a year now, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
What's your philosophy? I mean, and give me some examples of some of the tools that you've rolled out. I mean, I'm a user of some of those tools, but where do you want to take it, and what's your philosophy and strategy?
Yeah, the philosophy is to think about AI as a teammate, not as a replacement for people. So somebody, a technology that gives people more time, makes them more productive, a force multiplier for what you're able to get done in a day. And sort of a way to think about it is, if the Industrial Revolution was about physical products and mass producing physical things, AI, and in particular generative AI, might be kind of the Industrial Revolution for knowledge workers. The mass production of information and learning, and ultimately returning time back to people to spend more time doing the thing you were hired to do, and less time doing the stuff that we all just feel like we're wasting time doing because we work at a big company. So we've rolled out some of the obvious things that you would probably have also rolled out. Copilot for GitHub, in the process of Copilot for Microsoft 365, ChatGPT, but doing those in controlled ways. Like ChatGPT is running in a private instance where we use the Azure PII API to remove any identifiable information from the prompts that anybody might put in. We also keep that all in our network, so none of the data gets reused for public training data. And then use technologies like retrieval augmented generation to combine the benefit of a large language model with the proprietary data that we know about our business. So think about things like TAC case data, Cisco product data. Can we make that chat be able to answer questions like, what is the PoE budget of this switch? When does this router get end-of-lifed and which one replaces it? I'm a salesperson. Help me write an email to the CIO of a big company about why Cisco firewalls are better than Palo Alto. And then not use public data to do that, but our private data from Salesforce and sales enablement material and things like that. The other big one, that is interesting is Copilot for GitHub. I think historically we all thought software development is probably the thing that AI will never be able to disrupt. AI is going to disrupt these lower order jobs like HR, task-oriented things first. And software development is just human beings' creativity and their brains, and it's never going to be able to do that. Turns out AI is very good at writing software, or writing code, and it's one of the first real use cases of making developers more efficient. And so right now, 47% of all code being checked into GitHub is being augmented by Copilot or some other AI. And by the midpoint of this calendar year, GitHub says 80% of all code being checked in will be helped by AI. And so now, you've always sort of thought there's no way to compress software development. That's why we all focused on things like CI/CD pipelines, test automation, because that stuff you can automate. You can actually compress the amount of time that it takes to write software, which is allowing us to really do more with less. So that's just a few examples of, the intranet, we're building an LLM-enabled digital equivalent of a friend who has worked at Cisco for 20 years and knows everything. So you can go to the intranet and sort of, you'll be able to interrogate it and ask it things that if you were a new employee, where do I find this? How do I do that? What's the answer to this? And it will just know all those answers. Giving you the answer is one thing, but it will be able to do those things for you and actually take the action.
So Fletcher, I actually want to thank you because you have been a very progressive IT organization, and you've helped us adopt these tools when a lot of the enterprises take the posture of, just saying no because there's so many risks involved. Can you tell us a little bit about your thinking process for being so forward-looking and enabling us with that?
Well, luckily, and by the way, I should have said, we are, of course, also using the AI features of WebEx, which we use every day, a huge productivity enhancer, and some of the AI ops in things like Catalyst Center, formerly known as DNA Center. That helps my infrastructure team a great deal. But I think when we have these conversations with the responsible AI team, with legal, with security, the easy answer is we cannot move forward until we know all of the answers to every question that legal has, all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. The problem is, if you do that, you're going to get left behind. So how do we do this in a safe way where we're protecting our data? And as much as we worry about our data, we really worry about your data. We got to make sure that is taken care of. But the philosophy is we're genuinely excited and curious about what people will do with this technology. So of course we have to make it available, but how do we do that in a safe way where if I'm doing my job well, people are not aware of any limits that we've imposed on them because people are not trying to do anything that they shouldn't be trying to do. And we're just enabling people to do what is required for their jobs. It's kind of the same approach to security. If you're constantly running into security controls, there's a problem. Really, you should be able to do your job and not be aware of any of the guardrails that are in place because you're not doing anything wrong. And it's sort of the same here. So, don't put, we allow people to go out to the public version, for example, of ChatGPT. But when you do it, you get a pop-up in the browser saying, if you're doing this for anything related to Cisco, you should be using the internal version. And if people paste something into the browser that is personally identifiable information or Cisco proprietary or Cisco confidential, we'll get an alert on that and we'll know about it. And so, there's just, it's a discussion with legal, with security, with HR, to get to the goal we all want, which is, isn't it going to be so exciting to see what all of our employees are going to do with this technology?
So I know we've all talked about that chart that I showed earlier. As you can imagine, we are building something from scratch. So everything from the models themselves, all the way to the application, which was the fourth bucket, to what Fletcher was describing earlier, where you're taking a model, taking a chat application, and customizing it with some of the data sources that are specific to Cisco in our case, to make sure that it's relevant, it's specific, it's relevant, and it's recent. Right. And so that entire mode, all the four modes are something that we all participate in all the time. And so with that, what I'd like to do is, we are also announcing this, this is going the other way. So we are announcing a new product called Motific, and Fletcher here has been very helpful in being a customer zero and helping define this, and so has Anurag because of all the experience that they've used in building out their product. The whole idea behind Motific is, like we were all discussing, it's a multi-organizational problem. So how do we bring all of these organizations together? From the end user, to the GM, to the builder, to the approver. Can we bring all of these personas together, as well as all of your organization's specific data sources, policies, identities, and so on, so that there is one place, a central hub, if you may, where you can come in, and this hub will help you rapidly and safely create and deploy your generative AI solutions. So that's what Motific is all about. And with that, let's roll the video.
The GenAI landscape is uncertain, a constantly shifting terrain. But organizations must engage with GenAI or risk being left behind. Introducing Motific, a a complete software solution that provides the GenAI innovation you need. With Motific, you can build trustworthy AI quickly and in compliance. Its centralized control gives you command over all your organization's data in one place, alongside enterprise-grade governance and oversight. Motific provides a window into your organization's costs and usage while accelerating your GenAI deployment from months to days. By unifying permissions and controls, Motific gives you GenAI tools that apply trust, cost, and access management across all the providers you use. From a strong foundation comes unlimited possibilities. Accelerate your organization's GenAI journey with Motific, powered by Outshift.
So if you think about the early days of cloud, this is exactly where we are with AI as well, generative AI as well. You'll have these organizations that are trying to run fast. How do you make sure that they run fast, as we've heard today from both our speakers here, our guests here, as well as making sure that central IT teams have the controls that they need and the visibility that they need to make sure that you're not crossing the boundary or the line somewhere. So that's what Motific provides. If you want to learn a lot more about what Anurag talked about or about Motific, these are some of the sessions that you can go to, and you can also come to our booths where we have the demos as well as talks on some of these ideas that we just discussed.
If I might add, because you talked about how we sort of contributed and inspired to this. So one of the challenges that we've been very aware of as builders is that the state of the art here is moving so fast that you want to maintain optionality. You don't want to lock yourself to a provider or a model. And it is very important for you to architect your product so that you can switch things out as the state of the art progresses forward. And a product like this would be a huge enabler in maintaining that optionality. And the policy controls that the video was talking about is also very, very important. Because when I'm building a product and selling it to thousands of customers, they all have their own policies, like Fletcher has the policy for Cisco. And so building a product that is flexible enough to adapt to all of these customers' policies is actually a very hard challenge. And then we went through this process, and so I'm glad that we finally are codifying all of that in a product so that the next developers are going to find it a lot easier to do that.
That's a great point, Anurag. So I think if you think about a product like this, I mean, the things that you brought up, first and foremost, the abstractions that you need to be vendor agnostic. So whether you're using ChatGPT or GPT, rather, or Bard or an open source LLM, it doesn't matter. Making sure that you have the policies and compliance and controls at your fingertips. Making sure that you have trust and safety taken care of, as well as your ROI and costs under control in one place, I think is super important. And everything that we're learning from both the IT and deployment side of the house, as well as the application development side of the house, actually feeds into a product like Motific as well. So we are drinking our own champagne when it comes to Motific. But yeah, thank you for being here. And we have to run, unfortunately, after this, but you can catch us at the collaboration booth. I think Fletcher is around as well. I'll be there at the Outshift booth. If you have questions, happy to answer them at those places. But for now, we'll have to run. But thank you for coming in and listening to us.
Thank you so much.